Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dager, the host of the Business 901 podcast. With me today is Ben Reason. Ben is the co-founder of Livework, one of the leading service design agencies in the UK, and the author of Service Design, From Insight to Implementation, and his most recent publication, Service Design for Business. Ben, I would like to welcome you. And I might have shortchanged your work limiting the scope to the service design and the UK, but can you expand on that for me and tell me the scope of Livework and your work more?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Joe. It's very nice to join you. So yes, you've shortchanged us geographically because we're also working in Norway and Holland and Brazil at the moment, Livework studios in the different places. But we are definitely service design and like to be and sort of proudly focused on that as our core offer. Service design kind of requires almost an orchestration of a number of different moving parts.
Well, so service design just isn't this digital thing like UX is then, right?
No, and I think that's why one of the reasons we started the firm, the three of us who founded Livework had worked for what were called web agencies at the time. You know, we'd worked on a lot of services delivering the digital component of it, and we thought there was a bigger picture out there. We'd also seen some of our projects fail because the digital and the kind of offline elements of the service weren't well integrated. And I think recently service design has got a lot of airtime in the digital space, but for Livework it's very much a multi-channel thing, and we have work that we've done which has been purely about the human beings delivering a service and how they do their jobs.
Your new book, Service Design for Business, I'm actually having a lot of fun with it, and yep. And maybe it should be read to cover, but I've just been all over it, picking points out and reading it and such. And am I doing it wrong?
No, that's really great to hear. I'm really happy because we wanted that. You know, we almost thought of having an instruction that you could do that, because it's definitely quite modular. Each of the challenge areas we've addressed should be something that you could say, hey, that's relevant to me or my project, and I want to just look at that piece. So that's great.
Well, I think I've read it all, but I'm not really sure. So it's like
we need a checklist on the contents page.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that's what I should have done.
Yeah.
Let me dive into a couple areas of it and kind of get in the meat of it a little. But one of my problems with service design in the past is the idea of this customer journey mapping. You know, we play so heavy on it, It seems to be such a big part. And I've always thought people, or a few people, arrive at a given point in a service experience from a multiple of ways. And am I wrong in my thinking, or do I need to make a path for each of them, or do we just try to push someone down a certain path?
I think that's a great question. I'm not sure if I have all the answers. I agree that it's dangerous to start mapping a customer journey as if there's only one, and it's also probably too much to ask that we map every journey. I just sprung to mind, we've been doing some work with a electricity and gas company where we were talking about one particular journey when people move home and how they transition their account, which should be really simple, but they have 300 different permutations of how that might actually occur depending on what tariff, when you've told them, what kind of credit rating you've got. So it gets very complicated. So you were interested in talking about the life cycles as well. I think there are what we try and get across in the book is that there are these kind of phases that people need to go through with a service. So you need to move from awareness to consideration to uptake, to being a new user and then renewal. You know, there are these kind of predictable phases that people move through, but how they get from point to point can be very different. So I think designing the specific touch points in the service to be flexible enough to cope with different routes through. The other thing, I think it varies. I think you can apply a customer journey mapping to something like air travel and be fairly kind of confident because it's a journey and it's quite set in its structure. But if you're talking about something less linear, then you're in danger.
Well, to jump in that life cycle thing a little bit,
Yeah.
I think of, some of these things that you have this. I'll jump into another point we talked in the book too. There, as I'm talking here, I kind of look at the customer journey map that we have these blobs, these oblong, these ugly looking circles and stuff that are kind of a scenario in it. Okay,
Right.
and those things are along the journey. Okay, and it's easier to explain maybe something in a scenario than it is kind of this linear process of what someone's doing.
Yeah.
And do you agree with that? And do you talk about that in the book at all?
But to start with the life cycles, I think one thing, because this book is very deliberately service designed for business, and one thing that's very important for large businesses or any business that wants to grow is to be efficient with its customers, plural, and have an impact on the top and the bottom line in the way that and the way that they interact with customers, having a role to play in how successful they are, and that's to do with all your customers, your installed base of customers, and it's thousands or millions of people. So if we've worked a lot with public transport, and they're geared up to deal with mass customers moving through stations and all the stresses that poses. And that's where the life cycle really comes in, because it talks to that level. Whereas I think the journey can be too much to do with a story about a particular individual and how they get on. So does that make sense? I think there's a tension between design's focus on the individual experience and a kind of big operational business focused on how do we serve this large number of people. So we're trying to reconcile those two things and make design more relevant to a business audience.
Sure, and let's touch upon scenarios in there a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, how does scenarios play a role in this?
Well, I think, again, scenarios are often a business issue. A business will have a number of different options for how they go about something, and we can look at those options and what they will mean for the customer and their experience. So we can help to assess different business scenarios through the customer's eyes and make good decisions about which will be most successful for both parties, rather than, so what choices. We did a piece of work for a payment company where they had a number of different business scenarios for how they set up the service, technically, and we were able to look at how those what that would be like as a customer experience and which one would be most likely to be adopted.
This book is Service Design for Business. What separates that from your other book, Service Design? I mean, why did you specifically put business in there?
Yeah, so the other book, and as you mentioned earlier, was kind of earlier, as people were still figuring out what this thing was, and it was very definitely a book from us for practitioners. We use it at Livework. Every new person gets a copy, and it's kind of got the how-to in there. And we've seen more and more there are people who are less concerned with how do I do it, and more concerned with the how do I employ it or in my organization. So we're looking at a different reader, ideally, who is someone interested in a new way of approaching a business challenge, and wanting to understand what this tool could do for them.
I'm a firm believer, and I mentioned that to you before, is that the employee experience mimics the customer experience, okay? And should our service design, should part of that be about creating an experience for our own employees, or is that too far-fetched?
No, I think, so it's funny you should say that. We're a little bit late with our 2016 service design trends article, but that's one of them. Is more and more, I think you're going to see service design employed for the experience of employees or frontline staff. We've definitely had a number of projects recently where that's the case, and I think people like Coca-Cola are looking into. I had a chat with somebody from Coca-Cola company who are looking at it in terms of as part of their HR approach. Looking at new starters or retaining employees. We did a project for a call center which was all focused on how do we make this job better so that people don't leave, because it costs us so much every time we have to bring someone new on. And the other thing is that designing that employee experience then has an impact on the customer experience. So you almost need to do two in parallel. We've done a lot of work with frontline staff, salespeople who are part of the service. It's hard to separate.
We kind of separated that in, that idea of front stage, backstage a little bit in service design, correct?
Yeah, and then we've been using a term which is on stage for the staff. So, who are the actors who are actually on the stage interacting with customers and delivering the experience.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent way to do it, because you have the supporting cast backstage, right?
Yeah.
or and on stage, that. And one of those things when I think of service design is that it's not a constrictive thing that we're handling a customer services this way. We're trying to build some type of rapport and some type of experience that our employees can give a customer, right? I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think with this book, we're also trying to move away a bit from, like you say, from the toolkit, the customer journey mapping, the sort of processes that designers like to use, and the things that businesses care about. So there's a challenge around how do I become more customer centric, and that's not by doing lots of journey mapping. That's by thinking differently, opening people up to hear customer feedback, getting them involved in thinking about how things could be better. It's doing design with those people.
I'm a lean guy, okay? And so I believe in like standard work, and I've had some conflict with some of the design and service designers in the world when we get with lean being kind of taken into the Six Sigma world, which is really not. Lean's a little different. But I always think that standard work is what creates the wow, okay, in a customer experience, because the employee knows exactly what he can't do, knows his limits, knows when he needs to go to help, so he has that freedom to act within his space. And that's what standard work is really about in lean. And I wonder, can you comment on that? Does that make sense that we still need boundaries for employees when we're trying to create a good service design?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think that, those things that make the job simpler, and if I understand lean rightly, also focus on where the value is being created and not on the waste elements. I think there's a lot of cases where probably you need lean practitioners and service designers to work alongside each other. I've had too few opportunities to do so, but my feeling is we've got something to offer in terms of stepping outside of the current model and asking a few more questions.
Service design is practiced worldwide now, okay? But it still has this little connotation of a European thing, I think anyway. And design thinking, DevOps, lean startup is real popular in the United States, but it seems service design is kind of far back in the path of them. I mean, what's your take on that? Why hasn't it been maybe more popular within the United States?
Yeah, I don't know why. I know why. I think that we were discussing today. So there's different levels of take up in Europe as well. So the Nordic countries are very, up there, and I think it might have something to do with their sort of social model. It's funny. You go to Norway and you talk to people about service design, and it just kind of makes sense to them. They really love the whole user centricity and things like that. I think in the UK we've got quite an unusually empowered consumer, and a government that's really interested in competition. So people will actually vote with their wallets and move. There's a lot of switching between services. So there's that level of competition, which I feel like creates some demand for us. And I wonder whether there's, we have customers in the US. We don't actively go after, because it's hard work, but we do have firms in the US, and interestingly, I think we're generally doing quite different work than a UX firm. We're doing probably more customer-centric strategy stuff for marketing clients often. And the other thing I think is just a really major factor is digital's such a massive thing. So all, the toolkit that you talk about is is for implementing digital transformations, which is a very, very high priority for a lot of firms. So, you need to get those things in place, and maybe the more holistic service design is just lower down the priority order.
Service design is, I think one of the reasons may be just because we're more product type thinking and kind of that product dominant thinking versus service dominant logic type is much more prevalent. Okay. But everybody should have a certain portion of service design in their bag, in their toolkit, right? I mean, because products are really defined by their services anymore, aren't they?
Yeah. Interesting that I'm thinking about some of the US oriented work we've done. It's been generally B2B, where there's still, there's a kind of higher ticket price on the product or service, and there's more of a human element involved in there, or it's a kind of complex space like pharma or something, where you've got multiple different types of customer, patient and insurance and HCP and things. But I think you're probably right with that. Product centricity. Yeah, of course, I would argue everyone needs a bit of service design in there. Absolutely.
What is in the future for Livework and Ben Reason? I mean, are you expanding more into the service design area and concentrating more and more in that area?
We've spent the last 3 years on the business focus, and really, we got to 10 years old and we thought we want to have a higher impact. We want our projects to have a higher hit rate and larger scale impact, change to serious change for our clients. So we've just come out of the kind of transition phase and the investment in the new thinking. So we're really excited. Last year was I think our best year ever. So we're really excited about growing the business and having more impact for clients and putting a lot of this work into practice.
That's great. What's the best way to contact you and for someone to learn more about the book?
So there is a website for the book. It's liveworkstudio.com/SD4B, I think. But yeah, have a search for service design. There's a Twitter account for the book as well. Those are two good channels for Livework. Twitter will get answered.
Okay. What's Livework best website to go there?
So liveworkstudio.com.
Okay. Ben, I would like to thank you very much for your time today. This podcast will be available on the Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 blog site. So thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you, Joe.